It's going to look like this, hopefully. I made a large pillowcase just because I wanted to have a big pillow that kids can sit on, that kind of a thing. But you can make it any size you like. I opted for a fabric that's really bright because I like bright colors and I think they stand out in the space, and especially for kids it's a good color choice. You can make as many embellishments as you like. In this case, I made a flower, which I layered essentially 3 flowers. I cut out 3 different flowers and I layered them and then I pinned them. The other embellishment that I did was making the polka dots, for which I used fabric paint, which you have to set with an iron. But we'll go over those steps again later on, and let's just get to making the actual pillow. So step 1 will be to measure your actual pillow. I will demonstrate that with a smaller pillow. So what you do is you take your pillow. In this case, I have quite a small pillow that I actually want to recover. I'm not happy with this cover anymore, so that's what you can do. Grab a pillow that already exists, or you can get an insert, pillow insert, anywhere, like at some crafts place. It's up to you. Or you can stuff a pillow if that's what you opt to do. It's nice to have the insert though. So what you want to do is figure out for your pillow cover, you want to figure out what the dimensions of the pillow are. In this case, it's a square, so it's going to be the same dimensions for the length and the width. I wouldn't measure at the end because sometimes the pillow is a little bit warped. So what you want to do is take it more or less in the middle, or maybe closer to the edge but away from the middle, sort of towards the middle. So in this case, 18, take it again here somewhere, 18. So that confirms, yes, it's 18, okay? So 18 inches. So my width will be, for my fabric, will be 18 by 18 for the front of the pillowcase. So now I'm going to show you, this will be my front piece. I cut it out already, but what you're going to do is you are going to basically measure out as best as you can. In this case, 18 by 18. Okay, so if I had my big piece of fabric, what I would do is I would cut more or less 18. Doesn't have to be perfect, but more or less 18 by 18. This is not super straight because the scissors cut a little differently. These are regular fabric scissors. You can use any sharp scissors, not the little craft scissors. They're not going to cut your fabric because they are fabric scissors, maybe a little bit dull. They don't cut quite the straight edge, even if you use a ruler. A lot of people, what they do is they use a straight ruler and then they have a straight edge ruler for sewing. So you create a right angle and you can measure precisely. In this case, do your best. And so I have my 18 by 18, so that's fine. I cut it out, okay? So that is my front, as I said earlier. Make sure if your fabric has a pattern, just make sure that it's aligned in the same way. This one has a little bit of like a little zigzag and little dots or so. So orient your fabric in the same way so that it looks the same on both sides, unless that's not what you're looking for. But that's a good way to do that. So okay, so this is my front piece. It's facing right side up. That's pretty important. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my back piece. This is the top. What I did was I marked it with a little T for myself on the wrong side of the fabric so that I know it's my top of the back piece versus the bottom of the back piece. And I've got my back as well. So in this case, what you're going to do is you're going to have the back piece the same width, which in my case is 18. So it's going to be 18 width, more or less. You're going to add 5 inches to 18, okay? And that's That's going to be your length. So now, if you divide it in half, if that makes sense, a full measurement, then your actual pieces are going to be more or less 18, in my case, 11 and a half height for each one, okay? So this one too will be the same. 18, 11 and a half, okay? Because what you're doing is you're counting for the seam allowance and you're counting for the little edge that you're gonna have. So, make sure the edges are more or less aligned. This is, as I said, right way up. This is the wrong side. That's the bottom piece of the back, okay? And that one is going to overlap. Therefore, your edges are going to be lined up, more or less, okay? Don't worry if it's not, if it's a little bit lopsided or whatever, because you can trim the fabric after you make your seams. Also, you'll be making like a lip here and on the other side. That will all be covered up. It'll look great, okay? So we'll move to the next step where I'll be making next, the little lip, okay? Okay, so what I mentioned earlier is what you want to do is you want to roll your edge. So what I'm doing here is I'm rolling the edge of the fabric, which is here, and I'm on the wrong side of the fabric. And what I'm doing is I'm taking it and I'm rolling it about 1/2 inch. So it's like this. So what I'm doing is more or less 1/2 inch in one and again another, and you have to hold it down. It's a little bit tricky. I've done that starting with the one end, and you just pin it as you go so it holds it down for you. And when you start sewing, you're going to have to obviously undo each pin before you sew so that you don't break your needle on your machine. Or if you're hand sewing, same idea. You start sewing and take out one pin at a time. So, I'm going to pin it. It's coming out, and you can see that little end. Tuck it back in and pin it again. Here we go, and now I'm ready to sew. Okay, so what I did was I lifted up my presser foot and my needle obviously and stuck the fabric under. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that the needle is fairly close to the edge here, this edge, but not on the edge, because otherwise you won't be getting a seam here. It'll be sliding off and the fabric will open up. I'm also close to the edge here. Okay, so I'm going to put my presser foot down, put my needle down, and go slow, because this way you have better control of your sewing. If you go fast, you can zoom off. Hand sewing, same thing. Just keep going with the seam going this way, right here, like that. Okay, so I'm going to start and go forward. And you're going with a small stitch, so it stays together. And I'm now going to go back. And so I'm getting to the pin. I'm pulling my pin out. You can even pull it out a little bit earlier so that you don't go over your pin, or else you can break your needle. Okay? Once again, moving forward. Whenever you stop, make sure you can use your hand wheel, put your needle in. Don't allow your needle to sit there in case you lift it or you want to shift the fabric, adjust it, and then your fabric goes wobbly and you lose your spot. So this is the seam, as you can see, I'm creating right here. It's really close to the edge, but not right on the edge. So it'll keep your fabric nice and tight. When you flip it to the good side, that's what you're going to get here. Okay, like this. So I've made the overlap seam right here on both pieces, the back pieces. So this one is my top part, that one is my bottom. So what I'm going to do is, actually this is my top. So I'm going to try to match the corners as best as I can. The bottom part is going to come in here. Again, match up the corners as best as you can. Whatever extra fabric you have after you make the seam, after you sew up your pillow, you can always trim it. I always trim it with what's called pinking shears. I'll show you later. It creates a nice little edge and make sure the fabric doesn't fray. So I'm going to match up the edges here. And then there'll be an overlap here from the top over here. So what I'll start doing now is I'm going to start pinning my fabric. So I'm going to pin right across here, all the way down here, all the way here, this way, and up. When I start sewing, I'll be sewing one edge at a time. In case you make any mistakes, it's best to sew one edge at a time. So what I'll do is sew this edge here first, then I'll sew that edge, then that, then that. Okay, so what I've done here, as I've mentioned, is I pinned the fabrics together, making sure that the overlap is quite straight. Again, you can always change the edges by trimming them. There will be some overlapping fabric and so on. There always is while you're sewing. Just trim that back after you have sewn. What I'll start doing is sewing on this edge because all the fabrics are overlapping over here and over here. All of them are basically overlapping. So I want to make sure it stays together. So what I'm going to start doing is start sewing over here and taking the pins out as I go. Be careful while sewing over here because there's more fabric, it's bunched up, so you got to go a lot slower. Sometimes you actually do it manually to get over that bump, and you just keep going. So I'll sew one edge at a time, cut off the threads, sew this edge next, cut off the threads. I do each side separately in case I need to undo some stitches and I don't want the other sides being affected. Okay. So I'll grab that. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, more or less. So I will go on top of the edge of the fabric. Put my pressure foot down. Okay. And actually I'm going to adjust it a little bit. That's why it's good to really, there we go. Okay. So forward and back a few stitches and forward again. Now use your markers here that you have on your machine as the straight line, so your guide, so that you can continue sewing a straight seam so you're not zigzagging all along, okay? And you're just going to continue. Now, I want to make sure that my fabrics are straight, that they're overlapping properly. So it's important to adjust anything that you have here and just slowly So now what I've done is I've gone over that lip area and I know that we're going to be all right because we've passed that point. And any fabric, like I said, that's a little bit uneven, we're going to trim it to make it even once we're done sewing. So what I did was I took what are called pinking shears. They have this little metal edge, the scissors. So they're good for making sure fabric doesn't fray. So you would cut an edge on your fabric, which is what I did all the way around here. I cut off the edge, the extra fabric. It also neatens up the edge, which is the whole idea. As I said, it would look okay in the end, and it does. So this is the back. Now here we go. So that's what it looks like. You've got the overlap over here of the fabric. Okay. Now the moment of truth. We're going to flip it inside out, meaning right side out. Okay, so what we're going to do is flip it, and here we go. With the corners, just work the corners out. Okay. If you don't want the corners to be as rounded out, what you can also do is cut the corner. I know it sounds drastic, but you can. You can snip the corner, and then you're not going to get that little rounded corner effect as much. Okay. So we've got that. Now, pillow. Just gonna stuff it in. Flip it up so it looks better. You can adjust it as much as you want to. Now, for the embellishment, we can take the flower, pop it on in the middle. You can use a pin. You can sew it on in the middle with matching thread over here, whatever you want to do. Ta-da!
3.
So with the embellishments, as I mentioned to you earlier, what I did was with the flower, I basically hand drew, but you can find flowers online. So drew it on a piece of paper, cut it out, placed it on fabric. In my case, it was the same fabric. What I did was I flipped the fabric inside out. So this is actually on the inside, which is less puffy, so it has a little bit of a difference in detail. And then I basically traced it. You can use a pen, you can use a pencil, trace it around, okay? Once you've traced it, use your scissors and cut as best as you can, the shape, right? Then I took it on my sewing machine, used a contrasting color thread, which was a dark thread, this was dark blue, and started off here and just did an outline with my machine. Then after that, I started again in here, made a spiral starting here, going around, and that's it. And I layered. I create extra another size, and I just layered it. 2 bigger ones at the bottom, and 1 on top, so it looks like a more 3D flower. With this, I used fabric paint, speedball, so it doesn't wash off. I took a lid of another container that would create a polka dot that would match my pillow size. I wanted bigger polka dots, I didn't want tiny ones. I wanted them a little bit kind of like messy because I like the effect, but if you wanted to fill it in, you could go back and fill in the whole thing and make it a solid circle. I didn't want that, this is what I wanted. So this almost acted as a stamp. So what I did was I poured a little bit of paint in the tray, used one of these brushes, dabbed it on just like this, making sure it's spread evenly and quite thick in terms of coverage, but not droopy, like that's dripping off. And then all I did was cover it, pressed it down, and there it was, just like that. And afterwards, after I've had these done, I ironed the pillow on a setting for synthetic fabric. It's synthetic. So you got to match it to, if it's cotton, match it to cotton setting, and iron the dots so the fabric would set. So when I actually wash it, it doesn't come out in the wash or smear. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you have a lot of fun. You can experiment, do all kinds of things. See you next time.